Welcome to the Executive Insights Podcast. My name is Richard, and I just got to sit down with Jess Corones, the General Manager of Performance at Swimming Australia and the Olympic campaign. You would think that Olympic swimming was all about winning medals, and specifically gold medals, but there's a huge amount underneath in relation to processes, preparation, planning, and obviously people, all very important to business as well. Listen to this fantastic episode and enjoy. The first thing I should say as well is congratulations for Paris.
Yeah,
if I've got my numbers right, it was 19 total medals, 7 golds, 9 silvers and 3 bronze.
17 or 18 medals, I think.
Okay, really?
Yeah, but
okay,
7 gold is correct.
7 gold is correct. So my numbers were wrong, but the gold, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And could you start off by giving me just a broad bit of context about your role, the macro picture of what you do for Swimming Australia?
My role's really, really broad at Swimming Australia. So I'm General Manager of Performance Support and the Olympic campaign. And so performance support basically is all of the people that are supporting the athletes and coaches. So all the sports scientists, the medical teams, working with the institutes of sport to make sure that the athletes and coaches have got what they need to deliver their programs. And then the Olympic campaign part is more around the design of the campaign. So what's the environment going to look like? What kind of camps and competitions do we need to do to prepare for the Olympics? Obviously, we've got LA coming up in 2028. So I'm going to LA.
Coming up. I love the way it's just coming up because you're so much preparation.
Well, I literally got off a plane from Paris Olympics and now I'm going to LA to start the planning for that. So, yeah, that's a big process, the planning for an Olympics. It's not really just the year of or the year before. It's probably a 6-year process in planning for an Olympic Games.
And my naive assumption was that performance would have been just athletes, but you've obviously just given a much broader array of things you do there. So what's a typical day in your life look like?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Like we actually do use that performance word with our whole team. So we want everyone to perform at their best, the athletes obviously, but we need our coaches performing and our performance staff performing for the athletes and coaches. So my days are really varied. Some mornings, obviously, I'm up early at the pool, which will be a sort of 5 a.m., 5:30 start. And then it's into the office for meetings and then back to the pool in the afternoon. And that's generally like a 4 till 6, 7 o'clock session in the afternoon.
Wow.
Yeah, and then moving around the country a lot.
And it's not a small country, so...
No, yeah, the travel is quite extensive. And then there's, generally a couple overseas trips a year. Normally like in the Australian winter, which is that sort of June to August period, we're overseas racing.
Yep. And in your experience, what are some of the similarities or crossovers between your field and your world and the business world? What are some of the things that the business world could learn from the sporting world?
We spend a lot of time in that planning and preparation phase, and that's what sets us up for success. And I think that's very transferable into business in the way that you can do it. We use design thinking philosophies in the way that we plan as well, project work, which work really well for us because high-performance sport moves at a really high cadence. You know, swim meets sometimes are on once every 4 weeks, so you've got to be preparing all the time, and then you've got to reflect and then refine your process and go again. That design thinking has worked really well for us in also trying to find what's the best solution. You know, so how do we not just do what we've done because we always do it? Where are we looking for solutions? Maybe we've got to go and talk to someone else or look at a different sport. We actually got from Rugby Australia the foundation of the ideas, the concepts around how to set up our data structure. We had a whole lot of data that was really siloed. The data is important for coaches. If we could bring our data together and democratize it and get it into the hands of coaches, we knew it would be really powerful. And we had to look everywhere. We looked at business, we looked at other sports to find what was the best solution for us because there is only one Swimming Australia.
Yep.
And so it was about finding what was right for us. And so making sure you've got that growth mindset, really go in with your eyes wide open and see what you can find in different industries and bring them back into your industry.
And so as general manager of performance, obviously performance is very important to you. So what is a habit or a trait that you yourself use?
To be honest, the key for performance is communication. And I really do think you can get in or out of that habit of communicating. But it's something that's really important, that you're staying in touch and understanding what the people need and what's going on in their lives to help them and support their performance.
Yeah, brilliant. So open, clear, and I presume some of that is feedback as well.
Yeah, feedback, a lot of listening, and then supporting, understanding, facilitating, helping them problem solve through different situations, whatever that might be. Sometimes we're problem solving things out of the pool as well, so that we can improve what's going on in the pool, because sometimes what's going on outside the pool in their life, also outside of the pool, can be impacting on that performance.
In your field, how do you define success?
Success to me is about being flexible, adaptable. We often say that we don't want to talk about results. It's about process for us. So that's where the success sits for me, in the process. If we've got the process right and we've been able to be agile and navigate that and been adaptable, that's probably what success looks like to me. If we've been rigid and haven't been flexible in some of our plans or processes, then I think we won't get the outcomes at the end of the day. But that process, although it seems quite mundane and routine, we spend 4 years planning and refining and practicing that process.
And then, like you say, ready to be flexible as and when things change.
Yeah, you got to be adaptable, The Olympics, for example, it's the most grueling sporting event in the world. It's the pinnacle of sport, but it's also probably the least high-performance environment there is. Buses go missing, they get lost on the way, you get jammed onto buses with hundreds of people, so you can be late to your event. The sleeping environment in the village is definitely not a 5-star hotel. It's more dormitory style. So, teaching them that flexibility, I guess, and adaptability to be able to perform in all sorts of situations.
And how do you cultivate that culture across the athletes, the coaches, the whole team, so that when you're not there and those things go wrong, they can be adaptable? How do you cultivate that culture? Yeah,
it's just practice, and exposing them to different environments. As I said, like preparing for the Olympics is not just a 4-year process. They start it from a very young age, and so we take them on training camps where we might do simulations, and sometimes we might organise things to go wrong when things are too perfectly planned, so that they're adaptable. And we have a national event camp where we bring 120 of Australia's best swimmers in and coaches, and we'll mix them all up in training groups. They do their individual squad camps. The coaches every day are designing their training sessions to have certain different elements that will address that will prepare them for the environment that they're going to go in. And I do the same with the performance support staff. We work with sports psychologists and other facilitators around how are we preparing ourselves as well, so that we can best support the athletes in that environment as well. We need to be flexible. You need to be really self-aware. There's that emotional contagion that can go on very, very quickly in a team environment, and in a high-pressure environment especially. You can see it spread like a bushfire. So you've got to be really self-aware. So we talk about it a lot, and that's part of going back to that communication. You've got to talk about it. You've got to keep working on it, because it never ends, and you've just got to keep it front of mind all the time.
That's a good point, though. So you work for 6 years, and like you said, the process is more important than the outcomes, because you can't control the outcome. You can only control the work that you put in initially, and that's the very same, obviously, in business. You're aiming for certain results, but you have to drive all the right process to get to those outcomes. But if an athlete doesn't get that, and you've got this culture of performance, and like you said, you're still going for that period of time, how do you manage that? What have you learnt from losing, the L word, unfortunately, or failure? And how do you manage that across the team? Yeah,
look, it's always disappointing. First and foremost, obviously, for the athlete, and we've learnt you have to acknowledge it. You can't sweep it under the carpet, because when they come out of the pool, they get thrust straight into media. You can't avoid that. It's compulsory. They go through about 100-metre mixed zone of media, and then the next spot you come to is straight back into your team area, and you face in front of 50 of your teammates. Even though there's a lot of people around them, it can feel quite isolating. So just acknowledging that they did try their best is really important.
Yep.
That they did, follow their process and worked on that. And you've got to give them a little bit of time to deal with it, and then help them to sort of work through it.
Preparing to win, but also then what will you do if the outcome isn't the way that you think it should be?
Yeah, absolutely. Like at an Olympics, a lot of the swimmers have multiple races. So although they need to have time to deal with each different performance, sometimes the highs can be just as draining as the lows. But how do we deal with it, give it its time, acknowledge it, but then quickly move on, because you might have another race that night if you're in a relay at the end of the night, or you might have to come in the next morning and back up really quickly. So it's definitely a skill set they work really hard on with their sports psychologists and their coaches around managing that emotion. We often say you kind of want to stay at about a 7 or an 8. You don't want to be up at 10 and then down at 2 the next day and then up at 10 and up and down like that. You kind of need to be for the week sitting at around about a 7.
Yeah.
And I think when you get to the end of an Olympic Games or a major competition like that, that's why it is quite mentally draining, because you have had to spend a lot of energy managing your emotions, whether they be highs or lows through the week.
Yeah. So conversely, the highs, obviously, when somebody wins, which is fantastic, and all the adulation, etc., does that become the bar? I mean, you say obviously you don't focus on the results, but you can't just say, I'm going to focus on the process now if you've already got a gold medal. Surely that changes the expectations of athletes. How do you manage that from a performance perspective?
Yeah, I think it does, but they're so well trained at knowing, I have to go back to process. Again, great you won, celebrate it, high fives, fist bumps.
Get back in the pool.
Yeah, we've got to start recovery now.
Yeah.
Really, they probably have about 20 minutes to process it, and then they've got to get back in the pool and start getting their nutrition, hydration, recovery on the massage table. They have to start winding down mentally, because they need to get to sleep as quick as they can that night to get back ready again. So again, it's really those performance psychological skills that they learn over the years as they go through different experiences. Obviously, the junior athletes, the pathways athletes aren't quite as good as it. They're learning that skill set. But the really great athletes, the Emma McKeons, the Kaylee McEwens of the world, Molly O'Callaghan's, Ariane Titmus, that is what they are good at, is really managing their emotion through those big weeks. As an Olympic swim meet goes for 9 days. So although they're doing sprint races, it's a long time to sort of be emotionally controlled and manage it, and just keep going back to process, but giving them some time and some space, whether they're dealing with a performance that they weren't quite happy with, or dealing with, the highs of winning. But I mean, the athletes will do things like they'll turn off social media, and they might have a different phone number that, only their family and closest friends can contact. So they can manage the outside world a little bit like that as well, to try and put themselves almost in a bubble where it's just their performance team, their coach, their close family.
All part of the process.
Yeah.
All part of the planning and the process to get to the right outcome.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a few of the obviously really high performers there, and you've mentioned before it's a big team. As a leader yourself and looking across that big organization, how do you go about identifying the kind of unique traits or skills in individuals, or maybe when you need to get close to someone or nurture people? How do you as a leader identify that across people?
It's about spending time with them, and you've got to really get to know them as people. We do live in each other's pockets, essentially, when we're on training camps. We're in the same accommodation and eating in the same dining halls and sharing meals. So there's great opportunity there to sort of get to know each other. And then we have structured sessions sometimes where we will actually might sit down together and talk about it, what are your stress points? How does stress show up for you? So then we're each aware of how that shows up for each other. And then if you see that in one of your colleagues or one of your peers, you can have a conversation with them and say, are you okay? what's going on? Do you want to go get a coffee? And try and bring them out of that environment. Even our performance support staff and our leadership team have performance plans. My performance plan is I get up at 6 o'clock every morning. I go for a half-hour walk before I turn up for the leadership meeting. And that's my process in just clearing my head so that I've got clear thoughts going into that leadership meeting. Over the years, you get really familiar with each other and knowing what each other's pressure points are and when stress will show for different individuals, and it's just about supporting each other through that.
There's a model that was designed by Berkeley University about managing or building recovery into your day or into your life, basically. So it's a 3M framework, it's called, and there's half an hour a day where you try and take those times. You've got the sort of the hour or two a week or a month where you get lunch with someone, and then once every quarter you should try and take half a day if you can and remove yourself from that. So in business it's very much the same. You've got to find that time and that white space to clear your mind. How do the athletes do that? How do they sort of find that space in the cauldron of the Olympics?
Yeah, it's difficult, but there are the Olympic Village has that designed into it, so it has breakout spaces, and the Australian Olympic Committee has some off-site locations that they set up in hotels, for example, where the athletes can go and meet their families and have a coffee with their parents and things like that. And again, it's all in that performance plan, and all part of the process. So knowing that we might have a really young athlete on the team, we will make sure and help and support them that they can connect with their family, because that's going to be really important for them.
I was talking with Professor Harry Kramer not so long ago, who talks about values-based leadership. And the first principle of his values-based leadership is self-reflection. How important is that kind of trust, connection, and reflection between you and the athletes?
Massive. Yeah. I'm a huge believer in self-reflection. I think it's the only way you can keep improving and get better is you need to understand yourself, and to do that you need to reflect. And that's maybe some of that performance mindset I've picked up off the athletes is like, how do you get better? You have to reflect and look at your past behaviours or performances to go, okay, well, how am I going to improve that for next time?
And what's your tips for self-reflection?
I've actually got a journal now, a leadership journal, and I'll often, when I've done, it might be a meeting or it might be a one-on-one conversation, I might go and write down, you kind of like let yourself, you got a little bit emotional in that meeting, and but it's not, I don't write like paragraphs. It might be just little things that are like, hey, next time, maybe this is how you could do it differently, or think about this, or but I find journaling quite good for that self-reflection. Yeah,
that's your process to be able to remove yourself from the situation and try and
to be honest, like actually thinking about it now, I don't actually go back and read the journal, but I write it down in there. So I guess maybe one day I will go back and read it, but I think just the process of coming away from the meeting or the interaction or whatever it might be, and then me thinking about it as I go to write it and then writing it down is that process for me, getting it out, I guess.
Cathartic release.
Rather than probably just like ignoring it and moving on to the next thing. I think everyone's busy and that's really easy to do. I've actually found with online meetings now, another thing since COVID, that's quite challenging is because you can get booked up in meetings just like back to back to back, and you hang up from one meeting and you jump straight on the next one. Whereas pre-COVID, when you were having more face-to-face meetings, you would have travel time in between. And then I think in that travel time, you would think about what you just did in that last meeting. Oh, yeah, that went well. Or I need to connect this person with that. And then you start to think about the preparation for the next meeting. Okay, who am I talking to? What do we need to discuss? What do we want to get out of this meeting? Whereas now with online meetings being back to back, you just don't get that time. So something I try to do, maybe not as successfully as I'd like to do, but try and put like a 15-minute gap in between my online meetings so that I've got a little bit of time to just
break it up. And for leaders who are looking to get high performance out of their teams, what are some of the tools or practices that you believe they should adopt given your experience?
Yeah, one of the things I was told early on in my leadership career was I was struggling with the team I was working with, but I went to our CEO at the time. I said, I'm really struggling, to get them to move in one direction. And she said to me, you got to spend time with your people. And at the time, I was too busy doing my own work and focusing on myself and my job and what I needed to do. And I wasn't spending enough time with my team. And I think that's really critical. I think in business and in sport, it's all about unlocking human potential. And you just want to get the best out of your people for them as well, for their satisfaction. You want to see them reach their potential, and that's really rewarding. But in order to do that, you have to understand your people. You have to know your people, like what motivates them, what does success look like to them, because my idea on what success looks like to them and what motivates them might be actually completely different to what they see as success and what motivates them. So, yeah, it's definitely about spending time with your people and getting to know them.
You're so right. And we're in a fascinating point in history, maybe, without getting too grand about it. But, we've got all of this technology evolving rapidly around us that's optimizing people and making us more productive. But still, the most important thing is people. So cultivating, and also when you're an individual contributor in a team or a business, to your point, you're kind of focused on your thing. When you become the leader, it's not about you doing your thing anymore. Your thing is the people and making them better than you, or rising them up as much as you can.
Yeah, definitely. It was something that probably took me a little while. Working in high performance sport, like I was really driven and self-motivated for performance outcomes and what we were doing and how was I contributing to that. And so when I moved more into leadership, it was something I had to learn to kind of let go of my own maybe ego and help others, get the most out of them. And it was understanding the impact that I could have versus just myself doing something versus the impact I could have on a wider system and much more people if I helped others lift up in their roles was really important. But it was definitely a challenge, I think. It didn't come easy in high performance sport. When you are working directly like with an athlete, sometimes you see outcomes quite quickly. When you're in leadership, sometimes it takes a little longer, or you've got to look a little bit harder to see the wins because the small wins are the things that will combine to make the big win, But when you're in those leadership positions, maybe because you're not there at the coalface or you're not there on the pool deck seeing it every day as much, you've got to look a little bit harder. And I think look a bit harder, but also listen. Listen to where people are really, when they're telling you that they're proud of something, is really important, because it's quite easy to just go, yeah, and walk off. Yep. But it's important to give time and listen to them when they're telling you they're proud of something and they've achieved something.
On that self-reflection piece, if you could go back in your career now and give yourself one bit of advice on something you should have approached differently or change, what would that be?
I think just to be maybe a little bit kinder to myself. I took the approach that I wasn't always the smartest sports scientist, but I'll be the hardest working. And so I felt that I had to probably give more time and work harder than everyone else, but I probably didn't give myself enough credit for the knowledge and experience that I did have. And asking for help, I think, is a big one, yes, it's very cliched and a lot of people talk about being vulnerable, but asking questions, ask as many questions as you can to those around you, and then just listening and seeing and observing how other people do things. But I think, the big thing, I reckon if I could go back and ask myself, give myself a piece of advice, it'd be, be a little bit easier on yourself, but then, ask for help.
Yeah, I think it's really important as part of leadership. A, is that humility to realize that you don't know everything, because we don't know everything, and get the right people around you who do know those things that you don't know, but also the willingness to say, I don't know the answer and I need help, or I need someone to find me this bit of information, etc. Because most people are a bit worried about exposing themselves, but that vulnerability
Totally.
is really important as a leader.
Especially, I think, when you're first coming into leadership, like when you're a junior leader or a developing leader, you're like, oh, like I think I have to have all the answers. And so I think as you get more comfortable in leadership, you become more comfortable in your own skin to say, like, I don't know, but I'll go and find out, or we'll find a solution together. Let's work through this. But definitely that's part of that transition, is like learning to say, like, I don't know, but we'll find it out. We'll work it out together.
What's next for you and Swimming Australia?
Well, the LA Olympics in 2028.
Just around the corner.
Just around the corner. And then we've got a home Olympics in Brisbane in 2032. But yeah, for me, it's about just continuing to grow the team. And when I talk about grow the team, it's like growth in every area, like grow the team as people. We often have young athletes coming onto the team, and we've got a bunch of new young coaches coming through and performance staff, so helping them grow and reach their potential. And then, it's about exposing Swimming Australia to inspire Australia through swimming, because there are so many different ways that you can do that, and swimming's such a fantastic sport, and we're so lucky in Australia. They say swimming's in our DNA, so to work for the national team in Australia that's in our whole country's DNA is like absolutely amazing. And I think it's just about getting out into the communities and sharing that message, and just continuing to help the athletes and the coaches be the best that they can be. And these kids, when they come into the high performance system, they're just kids, and they have these amazing dreams, and you just want to help them reach that potential. And there's absolutely nothing better than seeing it when they achieve their dream. It's just like, it's the most unbelievable thing to see them touch that wall and win that Olympic gold medal. And it doesn't happen for everyone, but when it does, it's, all the hard work's paid off, and you're just so happy for them.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I wish them and you all the success for the upcoming Olympics, and I hope many more gold medals to come, although you're focusing on the process, of course.
Yes, thanks, Richard.
But still, all the best, and thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Cheers, Jess.